What is going on, YouTube? What is going on, fellow fantasy people? And most importantly, what is going on, the Catch fam? It is your boy John and a long-awaited arrival by our boy Steven's in the building. Been a couple videos. Super stoked to have you here, man. So today we're actually starting to roll through our ranking videos. So we're super stoked for these. Today gonna get the lowdown on the running back position, the most important position in fantasy football from, I think, both of our perspectives. Definitely from my perspective, and I don't want to speak for you, but I think from your perspective as well. So anything you want to add before we start cracking this down, man?
No, man. Yeah, this has been the backbone of my drafts over the past 5+ years. Running back is key to your teams most of the time, obviously dependent upon, your leagues. But I would say, we need to identify those backs in the first 3 rounds, especially that are going to really carry your team to the championship, because that's what we care about. We want you guys to win your leagues and win the prize.
Absolutely. Whatever that prize may be.
Even if it's just embarrassing your friends, because sometimes that's even better. I love the roast in that.
Okay. I see where you're going with that. All right, so number 1 overall, I think for both of us, I think for everyone who plays fantasy football, every ranking out there, I think it's Christian McCaffrey, no matter who you are. Essentially, obviously coming off the injury last year, someone who you had on your team last year, you picked him number 1 overall last year. But obviously coming off the injury, but I just don't think that anyone's concerned whatsoever. I mean, we know what he can do from the position of running back, but really you're not just getting a running back with the selection of Christian McCaffrey, you're getting that receiver running back, right? The only really player who is a true wide receiver 1 and an RB1, right? So there's really nothing for me to debate, but I know that Christian McCaffrey is someone who you're absolutely in love with. I mean, for good reason, but I'm interested to see if you have anything compelling to say.
Yeah, man, I do think CMC is somebody, don't overthink this pick, man. When you see him at 101, take him, because you're getting an RB1 who might give you 20 plus points a week, and you're also getting a wide receiver type of player right there, and it allows you a lot of flexibility in your draft at that 101 spot. And I think another thing too is, as this team develops, and Sam Darnold has been heavily targeting him in training camp, this is going to be a guy who's critical to the development of Sam Darnold. The Matt Rule system has been in love with him too. And I mean, like you said, I was a CMC owner last year. I dealt with the downfall of kind of having him injured, but CMC's injury is not something to be super concerned about. He's been healthy actually for some time. He could have played last year if they were a better football team. Sure. Let's not forget about that. This is a team coming in here that is also going to see some defenses that, I do think this guy's going to eat it up. He's a matchup proof type of player, which is what you want with your first pick.
Absolutely. I mean, he did play in 3 games last year, and it's just kind of crazy to think in those 3 games he had just under 82 fantasy points, which he's just an incredible football player, right? From every perspective. We know really what he did in his rookie year, what he did in 2018, and what he did in 2019. Obviously, the latter of the two being the better years from a fantasy perspective, but there's really just nothing to debate, right? I mean, we could sit here and dive into these numbers and this and that. There's a lot you could talk about Christian McCaffrey as a football player, as a fantasy player, but is there really any reason to? I mean, he's the number 1 pick, right?
Yeah, I think the only con you could maybe talk about here is that I think this is an offense that eventually is going to be it's super dependent on Sam Darnold. So the only con is if Sam Darnold is somehow just even worse than their quarterback situation was last time. I don't think it's going to be that case, and I still think he's a solid 101 pick.
I mean, regardless, he is the offense in Carolina. The offense is built around him. So, yeah. But I do think it's a valid point as well. So, all right, let's move on, right? Let's just do it, right? Number 2. Yeah. Who's your number 2, Steve?
Yeah, Dalvin Cook, running back for the Vikings. I think this guy is a stud. Obviously had a ton of issues in the past with injuries, with an extra game on his on the schedule, obviously for everybody. You could see him missing time again. But, dude, this guy is groundbreaking talented. I mean, I think he actually might be the most talented back in the NFL. Again, another player that can do it out of the backfield, receiving and also rushing. And this Viking offense is good, man. So this is another guy who I think is sure-proof, really solid 1-2 pick. And you can build around him too. And I do think this guy is going to see a lot of touchdowns, but more importantly, he's going to churn up yards. Last season, he was on pace to shatter the record. Obviously, injuries kind of set that back a bit, but I think he's just going to be right on pace with that again. And this offense is even more balanced with a lot more focus on how are we going to cover Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. Irv Smith at tight end also getting better. We still got Kirk Cousins, who is a solid distributor week over week. This is an offense that you really have to be prepared for everybody, which allows Dalvin Cook to just churn up defenses.
You know who else turns up defenses, Steven?
Yeah, I know, your boy, 22.
The RB2 of last year. My RB2 for our rankings, Derrick Henry. So probably pretty controversial, my number 2 pick here. But I just don't... I understand that, guys like Cook and Kamara are going to come out and they're going to be, receiving backs as well. And I understand the hesitancy in terms of wear and tear. And obviously, to some degree, Derrick Henry has to have some regression, whether it's just from the amount of touches. But I don't care. Derrick Henry's my number 2 back, and I don't really know if I have a good way of explaining why, but I just have more faith in selecting Derrick Henry. And part of it's one of those gut instinct things, but also part of it is based on statistics. And I just want Derrick Henry more than I want Dalvin Cook. And I think, if you're going to make, and not you specifically, but someone out there is going to make the argument that, well, Derrick Henry is probably going to get hurt this year. Well, yeah. Dalvin Cook might get hurt this year too. Ezekiel Elliott might get hurt this year, et cetera, et cetera. We have seen a lot of these top tier backs get hurt from time to time. It's definitely something that happens at the position. So I don't know. I'm just all for Derrick Henry. I mean, I think to some degree, I think you can argue he's, in my opinion, the best running back in the league. Like, when you watch him play, you just think running back, right? And that's no knock on these other guys who are a little bit more hybrid in the sense that they catch the football as well. But I don't really care if people hate me for this. Derrick Henry is my number 2 running back, and I am content with that. And that's really the whole deal with fantasy. As long as you're content with who you are going to pick and who you're going to pick over other players, then it's fine, right? So I can't really disagree with your pick. I mean, he is a stud. Nobody in the fantasy community can really argue against that. As a Colts fan, it sucks watching him 2 times a year just absolutely rip us apart. I think, there's so many pros for Derrick Henry favorites type of like fantasy owners like yourself. And I think one of them is just like, this has been a very efficient offense with Tennessee, who gets a lot of touchdowns, and he just rips through in the red zone, tons of rushing touchdown and upside. Obviously the biggest downside is really just like this guy has not been a real PPR type of player. So, let's also factor in the fact that like we need to think about your league in particular. Like if you're in a standard league, like this guy goes up even more. Yeah. I have him ranked as like my fifth running back, but if this was a standard league, it'd be much higher. That PPR is definitely a concern for me because he has not been like a very vital part of this offense in the receiving game. They're adding pieces to the offense in the receiving game as well. Obviously bringing in Julio Jones. But I think that helps him.
No, it does. I mean, it's going to clear the defenses out. But, can you see a world where, they changed their coordinator, their offensive coordinator? I mean, Arthur Smith is not there anymore. And he was a large reason for the resurgence of Derrick Henry. And so maybe do we see them take a different approach and maybe try to unlock Ryan Tannehill a little bit and say, look, we just like spent resources to get Julio in here. Let's let Tannehill cook because he has proven to be a stud.
Yeah, I mean, almost 400 touches last year by Derrick Henry. So
Mhm.
I certainly don't, I certainly can see some regression in some of these numbers. And yeah, I think you make a great point about, a new OC there. Um, but once again, it's just my pick.
Yeah.
Hate it or love it. It's just where I'm at right now. Like, if we were drafting today, I want Derrick Henry on my team, and I think him being RB number 2 last year, but being scooted down in so many rankings to number 4, number 5. I guess the point I'm trying to make is that just because there are several rankings out there that say a guy should be number 4, number 5, doesn't mean that you should be completely biased towards all these
Yeah.
rankings out there. I mean, if you have faith in a player, then stick with that guy. You know what I'm saying? So, with that being said, Dalvin Cook is my number 3, and I don't really need to dig into Dalvin Cook. You already touched on him, so and I think you really touched on anything and everything I would say. But part of me wants my number 3 to be who your number 3 is, and that of Alvin Kamara, who I think, I mean, obviously you're number 3, so I'll let you speak more, but I just want to make one quick note is that I do think, I mean, Alvin Kamara was the number 1 running back in fantasy last year.
Mhm.
Obviously, there's a certain game that, really affected those numbers, and we can
Yeah.
debate all of that as well, but part of me is also saying, why isn't Alvin Kamara being considered the RB2 at least this year? So kind of the same deal with Derrick Henry, where why are Henry and Kamara scooted those extra 2 spots down and behind some of these other players? But I'll let you dig into Kamara, as he is your 3rd overall ranked running back. And just to go and throw it out there, I have got him ranked number 4 ahead of Dalvin Cook. But like I said, part of me wants to scoot him up above Dalvin Cook. So, but I'll let you touch on Kamara finally. I'm done.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, you piece of crap. No, I think, Kamara is a very exciting player. I mean, this is a guy who, in terms of why he's maybe been hated on in the fantasy, he's not even hated on, but like you said, I mean, he has been kind of sliding down. And then, I think there's a serious argument for why he could be even RB1 on the season,
Sure.
because this guy is going to be the only focus now of this Saints offense. But
Yeah.
that's kind of a double-edged sword, because now we're talking about, like, we don't have Michael Thomas anymore, so defenses aren't focused on that. Like, who are they going to be super scared of on this team other than Alvin Kamara? And then if Taysom Hill's the quarterback, I do think there's an element of, like, he might lose red zone touches in terms of Taysom Hill is going to take away from his touchdowns. And his touchdowns have been a major part of why this guy has been such a fantasy stud. His touchdown efficiency is, like, unmatched in, like, fantasy history. Now, we're also talking about Jameis Winston. I do think if he's playing, I think he's a better, like, he's going to help out any player on this fantasy, like on this roster in terms of fantasy, just
Sure.
because he's going to give more opportunities, more looks. But either way, I think Alvin Kamara, just the overall volume that he's going to see, warrants him to be a top 3 back. Now, the difference is going to be here is if Alvin Kamara can kind of separate himself from the rest of this team, which is kind of lacklustering, which I think Kamara's going to be able to do. I think week to week, he's going to be able to shine, and his touches and his targets are going to go up. He's really the only security blanket, and that's what makes him such a solid number 3 for me, because I don't care who's at quarterback, they're going to look to throw it to him in any situation over looking at, like, I don't know, Smith, going deep on a route, or Adam Troutman in the middle, as much as I love my guy. But
Yeah.
and this is still a solid O-line and a Sean Payton
A great
offense.
O-line, yeah.
Yeah, so this is, I mean, it's almost like the role has changed to where a lot more is going to be demanded of Alvin Kamara.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think you said it perfectly, a double-edged sword, right? There's really 2 ways to look at this, and that is probably why he's been scooted back on rankings, is either he's completely hurt by the departure of Drew Brees, and that tanks, the offense as a whole, or the other way to look at it, like you touched on, is Kamara is the offense now, and he is going to get X more amount of touches, throughout the season, which raises his fantasy value. So there's definitely two ways to look at it, but I think nonetheless, Kamara is going to have a monster year. It's more based on who he is as a player and a fantasy player.
I'd love to get him. I would love to have him on my team this year.
Yeah. And he's one of those players, outside the top two where you're probably going to see Christian McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook taken in most leagues. If I had the third or fourth overall selection, it's a really hard decision. Even with me just saying how much I love Derrick Henry, if Kamara is sitting there, there's definitely a debate for that 30 or 60 seconds, however, long you have to pick, where I'm like, God, he's just an animal, he's a different kind of player. So, but yeah, I think you touched on everything great there. Definitely, any points I would make as well. So, at the next kind of spot here, we've got our number 4 spot. My number 4 being Kamara, and then you have got Zeke Elliott. So, and then we'll go ahead and kind of put this out there too. My number 5 is Zeke, since we just touched on Kamara, and your number 5 is Derrick Henry, who we've already talked about. So let's just go ahead. Let's go over Zeke, because it is an interesting year for Ezekiel Elliott, and kind of the resurgence of that Dallas Cowboys offense. Zeke finishing RB11 last year. Obviously the injury to Dak Prescott made it a lot easier for defenses to game plan against that of Ezekiel Elliott. But he still had a pretty good fantasy year, and those games where Dak Prescott was healthy, he had 14 plus fantasy points in all of those games on average. So I don't know. What do you think about Zeke this year is what I'm interested in.
Yeah, dude, I'm pumped for Zeke. I think he's going to have some of the best positive regression in terms of fantasy this year out of all the top 12 running backs. I mean, having Zeke at 11 it's just not who Zeke is. Zeke is a top 5 running back. And I think he always will be. I think last year was the exception. The thing with Zeke is Zeke offers everything you want out of a running back in terms of that. We're not even including the PPR standpoint. This guy, I think, is the best running back in terms of do it all outside of Christian McCaffrey. Just because the fact that he can just take, I think he can take such a serious workload. His durability has been proven. And he's part of this Dallas Cowboys team, which is so explosive. My biggest concerns with Zeke are probably let's see how this Dak Prescott injury that's been going on kind of progresses. Because if he, if it's a base case where Dak is ready week 1, I think we're going to see Zeke Elliott become a major part of this team in terms of let's ease the burden on Dak. But Zeke is going to see a ton of red zone touches. I'm not worried about Tony Pollard eating into his workload at all. I don't think Tony Pollard's going to have 100-yard game. If Zeke's healthy, Zeke is going to be eating all day. And he needs to, because he's looking skinny and in shape, man. Yeah. Zeke looks like he's the best health he's ever been in. Yeah. And the thing that makes Zeke a top 5 back for me, on top of the fact that he is just a do-it-all running back, is the fact that he is do-it-all. He can catch out of the backfield. He can make electric moves in the open space, and then he can break tackles with the best of them. I see serious rushing touchdown upside, receiving touchdown upside. There's some HBO Hard Knocks highlights out there of him running routes at receiver against DBs. This could be a big year for him. And if you're a defense playing against the Cowboys, what the hell are you doing, man? You got CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup. There's no way it's similar to Tennessee and the argument you made with the Titans. It's you can't stack the box against Zeke anymore. Sure. So Zeke is going to eat. And just throw out last year. Throw out number 11. I think worst case scenario, he's a top 6, top 7 back. Best case scenario, he's RB1. I think that's a possibility this year.
Sure. I'm not going to say that it's not a possibility. And you look at his stats and you start to break them down. Other than his rookie season and really his second season in the league where he dealt with all that suspension and everything. 50 plus receptions in the last 3 years. Just when you really start to look at some of the numbers with what he's done, it's he should absolutely be, in the conversation as, one of the best fantasy backs in the league. It is kind of interesting that, in terms of fantasy community, a couple of weeks ago, people were saying Zeke is RB10, RB9, around that area. And then out of nowhere, it's everyone's oh, shit. wait a minute, he should be much, much higher on everyone's draft boards. But I think the thing with Ezekiel Elliott overall, and kind of like where or how you should evaluate him as a running back, fantasy running back, really relies on your faith in the Dallas Cowboys offense as a whole and what you believe they are going to do this year. And most people believe that they are going to have a fantastic offensive season. And I just think wherever you lie with your faith in the Dallas Cowboys, wherever you lie in your faith in what Dak Prescott is going to be able to do in terms of leading this team, should kind of help you figure out how high you are on Ezekiel Elliott as well. But I will say that I don't think he is going to last past pick 5 in any fantasy leagues unless someone goes out and picks up one of those guys like a Travis Kelce super early, or decides they want to get a quarterback in the top 5 or something, or wants to go out and get Devontae Adams. You have to be extremely fortunate for Ezekiel Elliott to slip past pick 5. So so go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like, when you look at that, running back selection in that first round, you want volume and you also want good offense. And so I think the Cowboys and how they look at the running back position over the past 10 years statistically, that's what they like to pair up. They like to pair an explosive offense with heavy volume to the running back position.
Sure.
And perfect storm this year.
Yeah, I think you're right. And another just quick note is that they still have a pretty good offensive line there in Dallas. So, but let's move on to number 6 on my rankings, who is also number 6 on your rankings, and that of Nick Chubb, who I actually think there's a lot of similarities, to a lot of reasons to why, Nick Chubb should be higher on, your draft board, kind of in comparison to Ezekiel Elliott. A lot of the things that you just went over, I do believe that if you believe that not the Cincinnati Bengals, different team.
Nobody believe in that.
Yeah. If you believe that the Cincinnati Bengals defense is bad enough and Nick Chubb is going to be playing against them twice a year. But anyways, if you believe that the Cleveland Browns offense is going to be as lights out as many believe that they're going to be this season, then why would you not have Nick Chubb ranked higher? And to add to that, this is the best offensive line in the league, and he is running behind them.
Sure.
And in my personal opinion, I don't give a crap about Kareem Hunt being there or not being there. I think that Nick Chubb is arguably the most underrated running back in the entire National Football League. Like, when you watch him play, he is as talented as any running back in the league.
He's so much like Derrick Henry, man, with just a smaller body. It's actually absurd how similar they are. I mean, Nick Chubb actually had a better break tackle percentage and was more elusive than Derrick Henry after contact. But you just don't think about it because when you look at Derrick Henry, he's like the size of your house. But Nick Chubb, knee issues in the past, like, you just don't think about it. But this guy is one of the hardest people to take down in the league.
Yeah, I mean, he missed 4 games last year, and he was still RB8.
Still RB8 with 4 games. And it was really 5 games because the game he went down in Dallas, he only played 6 snaps or something. So, I mean, that was the craziest stat about Nick Chubb. It's
and then his worst game being against Baltimore in week 1. So, he did come out and have 23 points against Baltimore in week 14 in the same season. But then again, Baltimore is a great defense, so I just don't understand why Nick Chubb is not as highly valued.
I think the biggest thing, maybe the real downside to Nick Chubb, I think, from fantasy perspective, is when you look at Nick Chubb, and I think you would even agree to this, I don't see a player that could ever be RB1, right? And a lot of people with the first round, they're like, oh, I want a guy that can be the best at the position, right? Well, here's the deal. Only one player can do that. And Nick Chubb isn't necessarily going to be able to ever do that because he has Kareem Hunt behind him, who's extremely talented. And also, I think the coach likes to run a kind of dual head approach. You know what I mean?
To add to that point, I think some of that hesitancy comes from if and when the Cleveland Browns are winning the football game in good fashion, it's if anything, they're just going to put Kareem Hunt in at that point. So if you're looking for Nick Chubb to get a lot of those extra garbage time points, to get those extra scores late in games, typically we don't see that happen.
Yeah.
I mean, every now and again we do, but generally speaking, Kareem Hunt's going to be in the game at that point, and that's what gives Kareem Hunt some value as a fantasy running back outside of any injuries. But good.
No, yeah, Kareem Hunt's in my top 24. We'll see that later on. And I think I even played against Nick Chubb last year. And, for that exact reason, like you were saying, like the Browns got so up on the opponent. He was freaking me out because he was balling out, but then they just stopped giving him the carries. And I was like, wow, thankful for that. But if I was a fantasy owner, I'd be pissed off. And
well, I was a Nick Chubb fantasy owner last year.
It was you. I just didn't want to call you out. But
okay. Hey, I loved having Nick Chubb on my team.
Yeah, I think, know you did.
Yeah, I mean, there was that. I don't remember who it was against, that one play towards. It was like the end of a game where he had like a huge 70-yard run and he went out of bounds at like the 2-yard line or whatever.
Yeah,
we'll have to figure that out. But that was absolutely gut-wrenching. That was the worst thing that he did all season. Worse than getting injured.
This guy could easily be the rushing touchdown leader. I actually would definitely stat that out and project that he would lead the league in touchdowns rushing. But and I also think that there's a good chance that this guy is the rushing leader in yards.
Sure.
But we still see the cap, obviously, of Kareem Hunt, and also he's going to see very limited work in receiving. But honestly, bottom line, if you get Nick Chubb with your top 7 pick, you're very happy with that pick. And
absolutely.
You were setting yourself up for a nasty start in your first 2 rounds.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. Which brings us to our number 7 ranked RB, who we both agree on once again. Another running back who I think is criminally underrated and in the same boat as Nick Chubb, as someone who just doesn't get the credit for being as talented. Similar. Yeah, I mean, and that would be Aaron Jones. Their secret's out, right? But I mean, RB5 last year, and once again, I mean, there are rankings out there that have Aaron Jones closer to RB 8, 9, 10. I mean, pretty high up. And until recent weeks, I mean, obviously the Aaron Rodgers news affected this, but even not knowing if Aaron Rodgers was going to be the quarterback in Green Bay or not, personally for myself, I still had Aaron Jones this highly ranked. And I just don't understand once again why people want to hate on Aaron Jones. I mean, he missed 2 games last year and was RB5. So I just think he is as talented as they come, and I think he is going to have a fantastic year. I mean, I do believe that Green Bay has a pretty difficult schedule overall, but we know that A-Rod is out there on his revenge tour, and he loves Aaron Jones, and he's going to want Aaron Jones to be a part of this. And I'm not worried about any of the other running backs on this roster hurting Aaron Jones' stock. I mean, he was RB5 with Jamal Williams, on this team. And if anything, I think A.J. Dillon is more of a kind of similar to the situation with Nick Chubb, where he's just filling in that garbage time. So I'm super high on Aaron Jones.
I mean, I definitely in no sentence would ever compare A.J. Dillon with Kareem Hunt because of just pure talent. But I do think that there's something to be said about like A.J. Dillon should not be as concerning to Aaron Jones fantasy owners as Jamal Williams was. And as a Aaron Jones fantasy owner last year, I was always mad with Jamal Williams and how much he would spell him. But I think this year we're going to see Aaron Jones take a higher target load, higher volume load, and we're going to see a more active Aaron Jones. And this is going to be another situation similar to Nick Chubb in the sense that he's in a very good offense. And the fact that you have Aaron Rodgers back there at quarterback, I mean, it just opens up so many possibilities. You're always a play away from, I mean, he has so many opportunities to have like 30-point games. That's one of the things that not a lot of running backs outside of the top 5 have, but he has game-winning weeks. Like all the time. And you need to have that kind of player on your squad if you want to make it deep in the playoffs.
Well, and I also think, touching on the schedule of the Green Bay Packers and it being a little bit more difficult, that helps Aaron Jones in the sense that he's going to be in the game more than likely for a majority of the game. So,
just signed a big new contract. I mean, dude, like this is the time. We talked about it when we covered the NFC North. I mean, this is the time to use him up because when that contract's over, they're going to definitely kick him to the curb. And let's just put some tread on that tires now.
Yeah. So I think we're both personally super high on Aaron Jones, someone we've both been taking in mock drafts. And I think, in my personal opinion, before we get to our 8th ranked player, I think there's a bit of a drop off here. I think these top 7 guys are the most elite running backs, the best selections in fantasy football, garnering that we're both RB heavy approach guys, and both want running backs and consider them the most valuable players, right? For me, these are the best 7 players in fantasy football, regardless of position, and the most valuable players overall. But you don't have to agree with that, but I just think there's a significant drop off after these 7 guys. So with that being said, we will take us to our 8th ranked player, which we both agree on once again, and that of Jonathan Taylor, who I'm going to turn it over to you because you are a Colts fan. So I want to hear your take on Jonathan Taylor. But before I do that, I just want to put out there once again, this is your RB6 from last year.
Yeah. And I mean, he came into this year when we first started doing mock drafts, or first started really analyzing the fantasy. He was like 5 to 6 at ADP. He's obviously slipped a lot. He's taken a lot of damage, I think, to his stock because of the fact of all the drama going on with Indy this offseason. I mean, with Quentin Nelson, Carson Wentz, but, there's some stuff to alleviate there. I mean, even if they're not there week 1, we're going to see Jonathan Taylor take a massive workload at that position, and behind it's still a very good offensive line. I think Jonathan Taylor, no way, like he's going to get 300 carries. Like I definitely see that happening, and his talent is too good, too unique to not warrant a top 6, top 8 type of player. And so I think we have him like ranked very appropriately, but there's a ton of upside with him. And the thing about it too is like Quentin Nelson, Carson Wentz, like there are a lot of rumors starting to circulate now that they could be back a hell of a lot sooner. Week 1, week 2. And if that's the case, like, dude, I think the upside on this really kicks into overdrive. Jonathan Taylor is then just a part about a better offense. And what we could see is similar to last year, where maybe the beginning of the season, you're like, man, I spent a pretty high pick on this guy. But by the back half, things are going to really open up. The Colts schedule gets a lot easier too. This is going to be one of those running backs you want coming into the playoffs. And JT heats up. He's a guy who more carries he gets, even dating back to college, the more carries this guy gets, the more he eats.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't necessarily have an awful start to the fantasy year last year, but he had a couple weeks where I could definitely see where people were like, and then even then again, I mean, he didn't have more than 13 fantasy points, until past week 12, excuse me. So, but you're absolutely right. The back half of his season last year, 21 points, 29.5 points, 17.5, 19.4, 37.9 on average. I mean, granted that 37.9 was against the worst run defense in the league in Jacksonville, but who cares, right? We know that he's going to play Jacksonville twice this year. So if anything, you should look at it as a positive. And I guess for me, just saying that those last 7 guys are the most elite running backs in the league, I guess the only thing that separates Jonathan Taylor from me out of that group is the question mark on how we don't exactly know what's going to happen with this Colts offense. But for me personally, that's still not a reason to just completely throw him away and not consider what he did last year. And you touched on it perfectly. I completely agree that regardless of if Carson Wentz and I almost said Nelson Aguilar, Quentin Nelson are both playing there. A guy you probably wish you had on your team, considering Devin Funchess. Devin Funchess is like your best receiver. But whether those guys are there or not, by week 1 or week 3 or week 6 or whatever, I just think he's going to have a good year, right? So I have no problem with guys or people going out. There are some mock drafts where I'm still seeing people, take Jonathan Taylor closer to, picks 5, 6, and 7, like kind of where he was going before. And I'm also seeing him fall to pick 11, 12, and 13. And I think, anywhere from pick 8 to 15, if he's there, absolutely amazing value. Someone who's going to be a great RB1 on your team. So
he's going to get double-digit touchdowns. This is a guy, again, too, with regardless who's at quarterback, they are going to be heavily targeting the running backs in the receiving game too, and he can catch. He had a very high completion percentage when thrown to. So this is a guy who is just going to give you so much upside potential, and he has such a high floor. If you get him at where he's currently going ADP-wise, it's a steal. Especially because I know you can come around in the second round and just pair it up real nice.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100% agree. So let's move to our 9th ranked running back, who once again we actually agree on, and might be a little high for some people, but Najee Harris is who we both have ranked number 9. And I think for me personally, it's just the fact that we know that he's going to be fed the ball over. He's
going to be a glutton for touches next season.
He looks to be the perfect Pittsburgh Steelers running back, right? And we've seen what they've done in the past couple of years with running backs. Like, they will break a running back down and utilize them until they don't have legs left. And I think, obviously there's not a lot to, kind of observe here because we're just going off of college statistics. But, that's valuable in itself. Dude. He was an absolute monster in college, So I would just feel more confident in picking Najee Harris than some of the other guys being ranked before him in most places, and then a lot of the other guys being ranked after him as well. And I think he's going to have a monster year, so that's really all I have to say about it.
Yeah, Najee Harris, we are definitely high, I think maybe 4 or 5 spots above ADP with this guy. But again, one of the main things you look at in terms of a player at the running back position is volume. This guy is going to see an absurd amount of touches, both in the rushing and the passing game. And the Steelers offense, it's not great anymore. It's not what it used to be. But the Steelers offense is still going to score a lot of points. And when you're comparing this guy to maybe a Saquon Barkley, a Joe Mixon, I think the Steelers have the competitive edge, even in the offensive line game, which is saying something because their offensive line is probably one of the biggest cons to Najee Harris.
Sure.
But in terms of when you talk about Najee, he has been I haven't heard of a player with more buzz at a training camp. Yeah. Apparently he's better than Le'Veon Bell coming out of the backfield catching, which if you were a fantasy owner in that day when Le'Veon Bell was a man, he was the best player to have. The guy was a do-it-all Marshall Faulk type of back. Yeah. But I think you're going to see a guy who gets over 300 touches in his rookie. There's no other person to really compete with carries, in my opinion. But over 300 carries, maybe a little bit close to 10 touchdowns, and he's going to see a lot of receiving touchdowns too.
Yeah, he's going to have a monster year. So let's see here. I'm going to let you take the number 10 spot as you've got Austin Ekeler, someone who I'm just not as high on, which a lot of people disagree with. I have him a little bit lower on my list, which we'll get to later. But I'll let you hit your number 10 spot, and then I'll get to mine because my player is just a little different than yours, obviously.
Yeah, something, again, I talk about a lot with when I rank players and when I look at, how their season's going to turn out is what kind of PPR value can they bring to me? Because we play a half PPR standard or half PPR type of league. If you're in a standard league, I definitely think that diminishes Austin Eckler's role quite a bit. But for a guy like Austin Ekeler, he is absolutely electric. Nobody's going to deny that. He's a part of a Justin Herbert-led offense with the Chargers who is going to be surging this year, a lot better than they were last year. And they were still really good, but they improved that offensive line. If Austin Ekeler is fully healthy, I think he's going to see a lot more red zone touches than he did last year. He saw a pretty low red zone percentage, and they were also historically bad in the red zone because Anthony Lynn did not know how to coach. So I think the fact that you bring in a new coach, you bring in reinforcements to the O-line, they're going to try to take as much emphasis off of putting too much of a burden on Justin Herbert I think you're going to see Austin Ekeler. Let's let him work. Let's finally let him be that back that can do it all. Biggest concerns I think you're going to see with Austin Ekeler are this guy has not been able to stay healthy. But, you know, we've talked about it all night, man. You can beat yourself over the head about injuries, but at the end of the day, you just can't predict injuries. You can, work yourself to death about, oh gosh, I just drafted a Dalvin Cook, but man, you need to draft for talent and opportunity. And I think Austin Ekeler gives you that.
Sure. I don't necessarily disagree with any of those points, and I definitely understand why he's valued higher on most everyone's rankings out there. But I guess for me, when I'm thinking of a running back, although Austin Ekeler presents great PPR and pass catching availability, great PPR value, right? He just from a rushing standpoint, barely does anything. And I guess that's kind of where I'm hesitant on him. I wish he could at least rush for 800 yards and more than 3 touchdowns in a season. And don't get me wrong, 2 seasons ago when healthy, he had just under 1,000 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns. So I definitely agree that the value is there. But for myself, he's just moved a couple spots lower than most rankings. And once again, I'm confident in that. And if he's available at the running back position, around, RB 15, then yeah, I'll take him, right?
Yeah, this is a guy too. He's probably going to be around in that start of the second too, like you're saying.
Well, there are people out there very, very high on Austin Ekeler who consider him, even closer to a top 8 back, which is fine. And I think part of that too, you kind of touched on it, has to do with your faith in that Chargers offense this coming year as well. So, but yeah, I think you summed that up greatly. So let's move on. My RB10, my RB10, right?
Yeah.
Is your RB11. So that was the point I was trying to make. And that's Saquon Barkley, right? So Saquon, our guy, I think we both like Saquon Barkley, and we both really want him to turn to that rookie form that we've seen him be before. But just being honest, although he missed 3 games in his sophomore campaign, he was good, right, from a receiving standpoint as well as a rushing standpoint. But there was a relatively big drop off, right? And you could argue that those 3 games are where he could have made up what he missed. But I just don't. Well, first of all, right? And I put this out there, in our NFC East podcast, I've talked about this through mock drafts. I just have no personal faith in the New York Giants offense. Yeah. So when you start to put in the other factors around Saquon Barkley, whether it be injuries, whether you believe that he might not return to true form, whatever it may be, if you add that to the fact that you have no faith in that offense, then he automatically is going to, jump down a couple spots. But that being said, if I'm at the 11th or 12th overall pick in a draft, right, and he's available, I'd probably still take him. I do think he is going to be a good RB1, but I just am not ready to, announce him as, a top 5 running back again. And I hope he proves me wrong. So.
Yeah, man. I think what you are seeing with Saquon Barkley is the fantasy community is really starting to freak out. Saquon is normally a top 5 back. Because of this injury, he is now turning to closer to the second round. And, I think in a lot of leagues, people are what the hell did we do here? When do we take the chance on a guy who can still be RB1? Because let's not get it twisted. Saquon is probably the most talented back in all of football, but he just hasn't really had the chance to put it all together at a consistent basis. And a lot of that is because he's been on a really poor team. And been behind quarterbacks, whether it's Eli Manning at the end of his career or Daniel Jones at, I don't know why the hell he's playing. But the bottom line is this, you can even add more of a skepticism about this. This guy might not play till week 2, week 3. When he comes back, the Giants are looking at him as a long-term asset, the only guy that really puts fans in the seats here. They are going to spell this guy with Devontae Booker or whoever the hell they have back there. And so I don't know if you're going to see a guy come out and be Saquon, the ultimate touch leader kind of guy. And when he is running, he's running behind a bad O-line. And the Giants also invested into receivers like Kenny Golladay and Kadarius Toney. who are electric players, but like they're not going to be looking to dump it off all the time. They're going to be telling Daniel Jones to push it down the field. So there's a lot of cons, a lot of question marks. And do you want to take that with your first round pick? I don't know. But if you get to that 10, 11, 12 spot, you can at least say, all right, I'm taking my shot here because he is a guy that can still do it. And I'll come around the second round, the third round, I'll shore up that running back spot. Sure. But let's not get it twisted. I feel like we're talking a lot of down on him. Saquon Barkley is extremely talented. We both agree that. We both think he's one of the best backs in the league. And the fact that you can get him this late is by all means a steal that you should be considering. Just be wary.
Sure. Yeah. And like I said, I hope he proves both of us wrong. I hope he comes out and has a top 5, RB type of year. But I'm just hesitant, and I'm okay with being hesitant. Like, I'm okay if I don't select him and he comes out and he has a fantastic year, right? But at the same time, I'm going to feel better getting some of these other guys I have ranked ahead of him and feeling, more solidified, feeling like I'm getting a player who's going to be more consistent. So we will move right along. My number 11 is your number 12, and that would be that of Antonio Gibson of the Washington football team, baby. So this is a guy who on average on most rankings out there, he's around that number 12 spot. And I think that's the perfect, area he should be. I have him, scooted up one extra spot, but I just think I probably have more faith in the Washington football team than most people. But I'll at least throw this out there. RB12 last year, and he missed like 2.5 games. So I think that he's certainly ranked appropriately, but I think that he also has an opportunity to finish as a top 10 back, probably closer to RB10 or RB9. But I think overall he's just going to have a fantastic year, mainly from a rushing standpoint and his usage in the red zone. And like you guys, if you guys watched our NFC East podcast, you guys know that I'm just big on the Washington football team this season. So obviously there's some concern because this isn't really a receiving back, but obviously seeing where I want to pick Derrick Henry, you guys know that I also don't really care about that. So I think he's going to have a great year, like I said, mainly from a rushing standpoint and from a touchdown standpoint as well.
Yeah, this is one of the most efficient running backs in terms of scoring touchdowns. And you can either look at that in the sense of like, is this just like a random thing that he was so damn efficient at scoring touchdowns, or is this guy just that good? And I would say it's the latter. I think he's really that good. Had around like 170 touches last year out of the backfield running, and it's like that's going to see an uptick. It's really how much of an uptick. I think if Washington's smart, they really make him a huge part of this offense. But I think this is a guy, again, who can get very close, if not at double-digit rushing touchdowns, and is going to see uptick in receiving. Because last year, J.D. McKissic took so much of that role from him. So I'm hopeful, right, that he will kind of integrate himself as a 3-down back. Unfortunately, there's been some downward pressure on his stock because J.D. McKissic so far in the preseason and in training camp has still been eaten away from him. Antonio Gibson's got this like toe injury that's just like still nagging. And it's like, at what point, like, is this going to be an issue? And can they really trust him durability wise? So I think we're both really sold on his potential and how good this kid is. But at the same time, too, you just have to understand that you're probably not getting a top 5 running back, but you're getting a guy who's very good.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And side note, I think J.D. McKissic is a great PPR value.
He's a sneaky ad at the back half of your draft. People are not looking at this guy, but he was a stud last year.
Especially in 14-plus leagues out there. I mean, that's someone who needs to be on your draft board. But I think you summed it up perfectly. And I don't think you're getting a top 5 RB by any means, but I think you're getting a touchdown machine. And like I said, I think where he's ranked generally, I think it's a perfect value, right? Right between, around 11 or 12 in terms of running back. So, so that would be your RB12. So we've got one more running back for this episode, right? My number 12, a guy who I don't understand the hate. You guys have seen me pick him in like almost every mock draft I do. I do not understand this. My number 12 is David Montgomery, and it's just baffling. Like, I don't get it, man. RB4 last year. RB4 last year.
Mm-hmm. And he turned up at the right time, too.
Yeah, this guy is the reason people got to fantasy championships and won fantasy championships last year. And I just don't understand it. I mean, you could argue that he should be ranked much higher than number 12. And I think part of why I have him ranked number 12 goes back to that idea of he's just ranked at a certain place on so many rankings that I feel like I have to have him a little bit higher. But I honestly think he might have a better year than, Antonio Gibson or Saquon Barkley or some of these guys, Austin Ekeler as well, so I just don't get it, right? And I mean, sure, Tariq Cohen's supposed to play again this year, but he's still banged up at the moment. And I don't care if Tariq Cohen is playing or not. I really don't. Once again, I'm content with David Montgomery on my team. I have gone out and gotten him ahead of some of these other guys like a Joe Mixon or a J.K. Dobbins. And I just feel more solidified at the position with David Montgomery on my team. I think if he's the second running back on your team, that's fantastic. That's a great value. If he's the third running back on your team, then he did something very right in those first couple of selections. But I will say, by the time actual fantasy drafts have started, he is going to be higher on draft boards. There's no way.
I don't know about that, man. There's such a stigma on this guy because of his rookie campaign. He is not a sexy runner, and he's not a big name player, and I think that can really hurt a guy's stock. But you want a running back with hurt stock because that means that's a value player. And we're here to tell you that this is a guy you should be in love with if you get in the second round. And if you get him in the third round, like you said, you're really looking good. I've got him a little bit lower than you, but not by far. We'll see that in the rankings on 12 to 24. But I mean, this is a guy who is going to see an unbelievable amount of touches. And at the same time, too, this is going to be a better offense next year. Once Justin Fields gets in, too, I mean, we're going to see a better team. And David Montgomery has been on an uprise since his rookie year. So let's not get it twisted, man. If you guys get him or get a chance to get him, snag them and don't think about it. Don't let your friends roast you and make you feel bad. Just wait until those weeks start churning and he's cooking.
Yeah, I mean, I'm over 1,000 rushing yards, 8 rushing touchdowns, and then over 400 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. I mean, they're not astronomical numbers by any means, but like you just said, I do think that he's going to have a better year this year. I think this is going to be his best year of football yet. So I want him on my team, and where you can select him, it just baffles me, man.
It's a steal. He's the biggest steal in the draft at that position, some could argue. So if I wasn't in a league with you, I would really think I could get him in the third round. So that's just a little advice piece to you guys. But I know that we're in a league together, and you're so high on him, you might take him with your first pick. So I know he's not going to be available. But no, man, this is a guy that you should be targeting. And with all the backs we've covered in this top 12, these are guys that I think can really set a very solid baseline for your team. And you should really be targeting because that running back position, like we mentioned before, is very critical to your team.
Yeah, while there's, a couple, running back or still a lot of good running backs coming up in the next in the next rankings, if you play in a 12-man league or less, in my opinion, your main fantasy goal this year should be to have 2 of these guys we just went over on your roster, which is absolutely doable. So with that being said, we will go ahead and cap off our first ranking videos where we went through RBs 1 through 12 from our each respective opinion. So that was a blast, man. I'm super stoked to keep rolling and get into the next episode. We thank you all very much, as always, for watching and or listening. Let us know in the comments down below what you think of these rankings. If you absolutely hate them, if you agree, if you disagree, if and how you agree and disagree, who you agree and disagree with, all that good stuff. And while you're at it, we would greatly appreciate if you smash that like button, as it truly does help us out and gives us a little boost in that good old YouTube algorithm. And also, of course, please consider subscribing for more future content like this, as well as our annual The Catch podcast. I thank you all personally, and I will let Steven also say his sweet goodbyes here.
Yeah, man, it's good to get back on here, do another video with y'all. And these rankings, we're going to push them out for you guys, and really hope that you get a lot from this. This is what's going to help build your drafts. We've done a ton of mock drafts to kind of supplement it, but this is what you should be using to kind of go into your drafts with your target board. But yeah, just really interested to hear what you guys think about our rankings. And 12 to 24 coming up soon, and that's going to also be pretty critical because especially if you're a wide receiver favorite type of fan, this is what you're going to really be banking your running back position on, and it's very critical that you get one of these guys.
Absolutely, man. As always, we thank you, and remember, you saw it here.
The catch.
On the catch.